Tuesday. Did you fall for any good April Fool's jokes yesterday? The Google Knows thing didn't fool you? No? Google Knows? What I'm telling everyone is that if everyone sits in the first 4 rows, we'll get out early. So,
What?
if everyone sits in the first 4 rows, we'll dismiss early, is my commitment. So, I don't know if you want to be the only person in the 5th row, Luther. Yeah, Google came out with this kind of April Fool's ad about Google Knows, which is some app or something you can like put your phone up to a scent, and by the scent it would tell you what it is or something. And well, it's a gag. I saw people falling for it though because they were sharing it like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be the next amazing app. I can't wait. Anyways, so that was funny. Also, the people that started dating yesterday or broke up yesterday, like, aren't taking it that seriously. Anyways, do you know what the title was for today's meeting in here? 6 bullets? Is that it? Leadership? Life lessons? Life lessons in leadership, shooting 6 bullets out of a revolver? Is that what it was? Do you think so? There was a revolver in there? Well, that was by design, it wasn't supposed to be in there. Anyways, earlier, probably, actually it was 2012, a guy named Jim Collins published a book. Have you ever heard of a guy named Jim Collins? He wrote another book a couple years ago, a red book, titled Good to Great. Have you ever heard of that book? Good to Great, Jim Collins. Well, he wrote another book here last year called Great by Choice. And he is actually among one of the better writers, actually, of leadership material that I have read. And I really like him because not only does he write in a way that's accessible to everyone, but all of his writing is actually built on a ton of research, like real research. There might be a good book out there that's based on very kind of rich intuition, where someone has a pretty decent gut feeling about something, but it's not always based on actual research. Well, Jim Collins is a research monster, and so he does a lot of research in successful companies, and it looks like he's been obsessed with the question, why do some companies thrive when other companies are dying? And in his latest book, he did the same thing again. And he's looking for patterns, if he can recognize patterns in companies that are thriving. In fact, he calls them 10Xers or 10-timers or whatever. They're companies that perform 10 times better than comparable companies do on the same kind of index category. And he actually generated a number of patterns that kept repeating themselves over and over and over and over and over. And one of the patterns is that the 10-timers, 10Xers, would shoot 6 bullets before they would shoot cannonballs. Does that make sense to you? No, it's not supposed to. Well, actually, yes. The idea is this. Companies that are thriving when other companies are dying are actually committed to experimenting with stuff. And what they do is they come up with cheap, low-risk concepts or ideas that they test the market with. And they do so by shooting them as a bullet, rather than making every idea into a cannonball that is expensive and risky and will make a big fuss if it doesn't work, or if it misses, it's a tremendous waste of resources. They do so by experimenting. And so he says that these companies shoot 6 bullets to calibrate themselves. And the idea is that companies and organizations set out to scratch where it itches in society. And so when the first iPod came out, I I don't know if you remember. Does anyone remember that contraption? Do you remember what the way it actually was? The first generation actually had a plastic circle that actually turned. It was a wheel. The center button, you couldn't actually press it down. It was just a contact point. And then it had 4 buttons like stop and pause and play and fast forward and rewind or whatever. Well, that was a bullet. It was low risk. At that point, Apple didn't invest much in MP3 players. They were just trying something. Except that that bullet landed. And so they turned it then into a cannonball. They calibrated. Before you knew it, there was nanos and minis and megas and touches and iPads and whatever. And so they calibrated themselves, and then they invested and kind of did more risk, took more risk. A quote actually out of Jim Collins' book is this: 10Xers were much more likely to fire calibrated cannonballs, while the comparison cases, companies that were not doing as well, had uncalibrated cannonballs flying all over the place. The 10Xers cases had a 69% calibration rate on cannonballs versus 22% of the comparison cases. In other words, because Apple has an ethic of shooting bullets, they're 70% likely to, when they shoot a cannonball, for it to hit. Where another company does not test the same way, actually has a 22% chance. Whether fired by the 10X case or the comparison case, calibrated cannonballs had a success rate nearly 4 times higher than uncalibrated cannonballs, 88% to 23%. And so, any calibration that you can do will actually yield 4 times better results than attempting something major without having tested the water. The reason this is important, and you may have not known it was important, is because sooner than later, everyone here is probably going to be interviewing for a job, putting together a resume, trying to demonstrate to someone why you should be hired over someone else. And one of the valuable pieces that you can actually add to your kind of presentation of self is to actually demonstrate, one, that you're familiar with conceptualizing and testing, but 2, that you are interested in being a part of a kind of creative body that actually tests what society is interested in and calibrates that way. And so that's actually a huge piece of what you'll have to demonstrate here very much sooner rather than later. And so that is the principle of 6 bullets and the cannonball. Let me ask you this question. Is there anything you're experimenting with today? No? You're not running any experiments? Sure. Sure. Well then, let's say this. Help me, give me some ideas of some problems that exist. I'm not talking about problems like you and your roommate aren't getting along, even though that does work properly. But a problem that might exist. What is a problem? A societal problem, culture problem, an American problem, international problem. Outdated education system. Okay, can we all agree that kind of in our grander picture, when you kind of zoom out and look at education in specifically America, it's built on an outdated system. We're perpetuating an outdated system, okay? And so, so you've recognized the problem. What is something you might do? Create a new system, just rewrite the thing. Okay? And so, the public system, you would just rewrite it. Just assume, if you could, if you had the option to available to you, that's what you would do. Is that option available to you? No. Okay, and so the 6 bullet method, allowing that to kind of inform you and guide you. Now what would you do?
Good ideas, or look at things that are working, try to put them together.
Okay. Look at things that are working, try to put them together.
Basically, curate interviews.
Okay.
Maybe experiment with one class. Get a teacher who's on the board and say, hey, let's meet the current standards, but innovate and modify as much as possible.
Okay.
So we're kind of doing something else, different from news, something else, but still in the boundaries of the conference.
Okay, so you could take a class, for instance, that is one of 5 different sections. So like an English Comp 1. And say, all right, for this section over here, we're going to stay kind of within the confines of the broader parameters, but now, kind of once we're inside there, we're going to figure out how we can innovate. And so, you're going to shoot a bullet that direction. See what happens. Does it work? Okay? What about in public education, in the public education system that maybe you have a little brother, or niece, nephew, cousin, or something that's in right now? What would you do? In the system.
Or we're talking about something easy, because we can go real big, or we can go easy.
A bullet is easy. Oh, so the cannonball is the big one. I'm talking about at Browne Elementary.
Well, I would say, like, if you want to do it with just your little cousin, whatever, maybe after school, try and go to homework in a different ways. I don't know, or, I mean, that's somewhere where you can go to their teacher and get their teacher on board. Hey, you want to try this? Or not parental, something different.
Well, it's actually, the education world is actually quite the experimental scene. There's a lot of experimentation going on. One of the problems in that world actually is that the definition of success changes quite a bit. And so, for instance, there is a test given to 3rd graders in our country. And this test, with actually very, very good accuracy, can determine, and by the 3rd grade, based on certain skills that you have or don't have, whether you're going to be a successful lifelong learner or not. That means a life of learning and educating and being a contributor to your workspace, to your family or whatever. Do you know that in a place like Benton Harbor, the suggestion is that 80% of the 3rd graders are actually not going to pass this test? And for the last 10 years, they've actually taken that test and decreased the standard. And so if you make it easier, more people will pass it. So your numbers will be better, but is the problem getting fixed? So it actually all depends on how you define the problem. My very good friend is the director of the homeless shelter in Benton Harbor. And do you know that in the last 2 years, the federal government has changed the definition of homelessness 3 times? And so every time the definition changes, our homelessness rates drop. Does that mean more people are off the street? No. And so the way you define a problem actually contributes significantly to this thing.
Do you know the name of that test?
I don't. I met with a guy named Bob Sorensen. I gave his contact information. He's actually, he's a guy out of Mississippi, I think. We met one afternoon for the entire afternoon. He was actually evaluating our program. And he was telling us this, his life work is actually going to different places. I know he's got a big project north of Detroit right now, where they're actually developing interventions for these third graders and helping right the ship on the issue. But it's a huge issue. And actually, he is quite passionate. He calls it one of, I mean, he sees it as a great societal tragedy. Because it's inhumane that we have students going through this program, through our public education system, and that we can tell so early whether or not they'll be successful lifelong learners. There's nothing in place. And so there's all sorts of other things that we do to children as they go through the education system. But yeah, I don't remember the name of the test, but he's the one who told me the last 10 years Michigan has actually lowered the standard, so that more people are getting rushed through, and we're now all bottlenecking in the third graders or whatever. So very good. What about academically speaking? Does anyone here have an academic challenge? Is there a class that's hard for you? Accounting, business finance, chemistry, biology. Is there a creative way that you can actually approach the class that you're not trying right now, that you could just test?
I was listening to a TED Talk. Are you familiar?
I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah, I've started on maybe I've started it, but there was a journalist or something, and he was writing an article for a newspaper about a contest where the contest is to memorize as much as possible. And so he was going in there talking to the winners and all that, and he said he thought he'd actually try it in the a few weeks before. And if anyone's heard it, you feel free to correct me. But let's just say 2 weeks before, he decided he'd try it. So for those 2 weeks up until the test, he decided that he'd spend 15 minutes every morning just trying to memorize things. And I think he used a method where basically to memorize a certain set of facts, you kind of create a story out of it. And he actually started the TED Talk by telling a story. And it was just some bizarre story. But at the end, he told us how each symbol or character or object represented a fact, and the audience could recall it. I could recall it in my head because it was a story. So if you like some process in biology or chemistry where some protein is being morphed into something else, an amino acid into a protein, and there are 60 different steps, the Krebs cycle, I think it is, or something like that, for example, you could create some sort of story out of it. I don't know how, but you could. And that would actually stick in your mind. That would be easy.
Very, very interesting. The reason why I actually subscribe very much to Jim Collins and his point about 6 bullets and cannonballs is because where I get hung up most is in writing. Is anyone here just a fluent writer? Because I need to matrix into your brain and steal that power. But writing is a challenge for me. And it's a challenge for me because I'm very uncomfortable with rewriting and editing and drafts and proofreading. I want to write it perfectly the first go around. I don't take a bullet approach to writing. I can't, it's impossible. And I think it's actually our fear of being wrong that keeps us from experimenting with stuff. And so we only try things when we're certain that we can do them as cannonballs and hit. A fear of failure. And so my challenge for you would be that you've probably got a problem that this is relevant, that could be relevant for, whether it is accounting or business finance or a relationship or a dorm roommate or a project, a group project that you're working on. But that you actually try some stuff and calibrate yourself as you attempt to solve the problem And once you kind of triangulate where the bullseye is, then you could actually formulate a very sophisticated plan and succeed. So those are the 6 bullets. Cannonball, leadership. And as promised, it's not even 12 yet. You guys are free to go, and unless you have questions for me, I'm happy to hang out and chat with anyone who does want to chat and get you Bob Sorensen's contact information, if that's what interests you. All right?